Dude, I don't even know. Um, this could be a horrible idea. I feel like it's the right idea. I feel like it's a good idea. I feel it's a smart idea. But I get these flashbacks to like jumping into the rapids and the fire of discussion and being horrifically unprepared. So it's so funny, man, because instantly, we try to do this, and for everyone who's watching right now, I want you to understand why we're doing this, why I'm doing this. I'm not gonna throw these guys under the bus. This was me. So
Oh, please. I love a good bus splatter.
here comes the 4:30 train coming through. Discussion is the enemy of fascism. It is the thing that fascism and discourse is the knife and the sword that just cuts through the bone and marrow of fascism. Fascism doesn't want you to have your own ideas. Fascism wants to suppress discussion and discourse, and that's just antithetical to everything that I am and everything that this platform is and everything that Tom and David are about. So, what I thought when I watched last night, and I know Tom, you were in like Tom's going to be kind of. It's interesting. I'm actually curious to see what Tom's takeaway from this is because he didn't watch it last night because he was deeply rooted in trying to get his PC working. David, do you watch last night?
Very well. I did. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Tori and I watched it over a couple of hours because we kept pausing and like having little conniptions.
I wish that they had a pause button. I wish Chris Wallace had a pause button. Right. I've watched it twice. And I would love to sit here and have a conversation and discuss the talking points and the views and the different platforms that were raised and the plans that were exhaustively mentioned. And I just can't. I thought about this morning. I have done this almost 11 times. I have like watched this process play out over 10 times. And there's a South Park episode that I love, and anybody that knows me knows that I have a great affinity for South Park. I don't have my cool colors on. I just realized that. That's what's throwing me off. Watch this. Yeah. We got like, I want to have like cool. Here we go. There we go. That's what was off. So stupid. There's a South Park episode. It's a giant douche and turd sandwich, and it's all about an election year, and Stan is having this crisis of conscience. He was like, I just don't understand why we're voting, and they're voting for a new mascot, and they thought it'd be funny if they one of the options was a giant douche, and then of course somebody else comes up with, what would be really funny is a turd sandwich. And so they go back and forth and they start this two-party system about a giant douche and a turd sandwich. And Stan says, I don't understand what's the point in voting when it's just between a giant douche and a turd sandwich? And somebody says, don't you understand it's always between a giant douche and a turd sandwich? And there's some truth to that. I don't automatically assume that, that is the case. I do believe that we've had people who have run for elected office who genuinely do want to do better and have positive impact and think that their ideals and their belief systems can exact that change. But there's just when you're talking about running for president of the United States, there's a level of ethical hoops that you have to jump through, and there's so much I think ethical attrition that must occur in order for you to take that office, because to raise millions of dollars and you're people pleasing on a Olympic level, right? Because you've got all these special parties and these special interest, the super PACs and everything that you have to just. Yep, I'm going to do. If that's what it'll take to get the money for us to be able to get in the office, that's what we're going to have to do. Everybody has to do it. The only one who said he could do it by himself was Ross Perot, and that guy bailed twice on one election. It was a circus, if anybody remembers that. So I think we all knew going in to this debate, rabbit ears, last night, what we were getting into. I was not prepared for what it actually became. I had my head in my hands more than I think I was looking at the screen. And it started off kind of not promising, but I was like, all right, maybe we're going to have some decorum. Chris Wallace was very specific and very clear. He said both campaigns have agreed to this format. Gentlemen, do I have your word that you'll do this? And just instantly, the difference even in the way that Trump came out, and the first thing he says, I won the election. It's like, God damn it, dude. Fine. Yes, you won. Why is that the first thing? The question was about the Supreme Court. You're like, I won the election. And then he makes a linear thought and is like, and that election, us winning that election gives us the right to be able to choose who's going to be in the Supreme Court, which we can, I don't think we can, unless somebody can speak to it much more intelligently and eloquently than I can. We're not going to get into whether or not Supreme Court justices should be a lifetime appointment. I don't even think we can really even discuss the Electoral College, because that whole thing is just so weird. But let me preface this entire thing by saying this: the purpose of us seemingly arbitrarily, but this isn't like we don't do a normal thing at 11:30 on, what is it, Tuesday, Wednesday? We don't do that.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
Sir, this is a Wendy's. I just, after watching last night, it's like, this is the I always want to be in the midst of the conversation that the country is having. That is true politics, by the way. It has nothing to do with politicians. It has everything to do with the vox populi, the voice of the people. What are the people saying? And I remember I was called into remembrance. This is going to sound so fucking pretentious, and I love it. I don't care. Marcus Aurelius, begin the morning by saying to yourself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful, the envious, and the unsocial. That is what I'm supposed to do every day. I'm supposed to put myself squarely in the midst of people that disagree with me, the people that I think are even stupid by my own assumption. Because, and if you've been following along, Jacksepticeye turned me on to this book, this incredible book. If you want to check out a great book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. I said that name right. It's Donald Robertson, isn't it? Scottish author. It's great. And I've been doing an audiobook. This is how long I've been reading this book. And if you know anything about me, I started this book, Meditations, and I love like keeping my books in pristine condition. This thing has been marked up, folded up like crazy. And it took me a year and a half to read. It's 99 pages. So this book by Donald Robertson is like, it's an audio book, because I was like, oh, I'll do it on my commute. And then fucking COVID happened. And I was like, I'd never spend time in my car. So I just picked it up recently. And I've been listening to it. I've got about an hour left. But he says, it's a great quote. He goes, we are inherently social animals. That's true. Like that is just like empirically proven. Like we talk about how many people are like, I hate quarantine because I'm separated from my friends. I don't get to go. Our kids need to go to school so they can be socially active. All of this stuff. We can agree, I think, that we're all socially animals. We are inherently social animals, designed to live in communities and to help one another in the spirit of goodwill. As such, we have a duty to live wisely and harmoniously with each other in order to fulfill our natural potential and flourish. That's what we're designed to do. That's why this thing is called relator. Yes, relator is a synonym for storyteller, but it is about relating. It is like, I have to understand where you're coming from. For no other reason than it helps me be able to deal with disagreements, different worldviews. I widen my worldview or broaden my perspective. Or I get to understand something about you that I didn't understand before. So I am not a political science major. I am not a political pundit. I am not an expert in government. I am simply a person who loves people and is deeply enamored on the borderline of obsession with conversation and discourse. And I believe that the only way through this is for us to be able to remember that we're social animals and that we have to be able to come together harmoniously and discuss, even if that means we disagree. There's a lot of people that, man, the second that I put this up, they just added me on Twitter. That's great. I welcome that. And people who say I don't, you don't know me. And someone said specifically that this is fascism. And so I was like, I want to make sure that I'm not misquoting fascism, by the way. Fascism is the forcible suppression of opposition and strong regimentation of society and of the economy. That is fascism. Fascism is a form of government that is ruled by an authoritarian leader, and the aim is to prepare the nation for armed conflict and to respond to economic difficulties. So, I mean, even within, you can look up fascism and you're going to get about, Merriam-Webster's going to have one, dictionary.com is going to have a different one. But it is, fascism at its base is the suppression of discussion. It is the suppression of ideas, bottlenecking it into one, saying, this guy or this person believes this, therefore, if you don't believe this, you are an enemy of the state. And there is definite evidence to support that that is the governing dynamic right now, is that you either believe this or you're an enemy. And that, as opposed to what is against our better nature, which is to go, what do you believe? And let's discuss it. So what I want to do today, and over the course of the next, I don't know how long, 30, 45 minutes, maybe we'll just do this for an hour. I want to know what you thought of the debates last night. I want to know what your takeaway is. If you walked away and saw that there was a victor, I want to know who. I want to know how you got there. If you walked away feeling stronger about your choice of candidate, I want to know why. If you walked away with a different mentality and go, I once was this and now I'm this. I once supported this person and now I supported this person. I want to know why. So that's what this is all about. If you're watching along on YouTube, put it in your comments. I think Tom put up a little post. Put your comments. He's going to be kind of scanning through those comments and go, it's like an old-time call-in radio show. Did I forget anything? Tom?
No, but we're
gonna be taking your questions.
Go to Patreon. We have a post up there. Post your questions in the Patreon post, and then join our Zoom call.
There we go.
We'll be picking from those questions below, and then bring you on, so you can ask your questions, and then we'll discuss it.
There's someone whose opinion I love. Our friendship is predicated on a lot of our often disagreement. Even though we see the world very similarly, I think that the way that his views and his life experience has informed his worldview, has widened mine, and has exposed a lot of times, man, it's like the reason why I believe this is because I grew up believing this. But that's almost like what was not incumbent upon me, but it was imbued on me. And it became an imposition. Like I was like, I didn't really believe this. I was just told that I believe this. And especially when you grow up in a specific geographic place, this is what you get. He's like, this is your geography. This is the way that you're going to talk. Like you're going to grow up in Texas and you're going to have this weird accent. It's going to be these temperatures because this is where we are situated on the planet. And by and large, people here gather because they have a like mind, and we're all kind of believe the same thing. And so there's this bubble, and this is kind of what people believe. This is what we think. This is what we do. This is where we go. If you have 3 restaurants in a specific space, you could probably guarantee that most people are going to those 3 restaurants. There may be some people that travel further to go to different restaurants, but that's just what we do as a community. It's like we naturally become a tribe. So it doesn't surprise me when people who live in a specific state all kind of believe a certain thing or believe a certain way, and then you travel outside of that place and you go, wait a minute, I don't necessarily, do I believe this? Is this really what I want to believe for myself? Because there's other people that are making a lot of sense, or at least it pushes up against this. Austin Wintry has been that for me as well, and so he and I have been kind of texting back and forth. And when I put up this post, and he was like, "You really want to do this?" I was like, "I don't know, man. It could blow up in my face." But that's kind of what we've done with this entire channel. Is like, I don't know if this will work, but there's no way that it fails. So I'm curious, kind of to see what Austin thinks. Can we bring Austin on and just?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, where is that guy? There he is. Hey, buddy.
Hey, dude.
Yo.
Did you hear that big build-up that I gave you? Because it was a pretty big build-up.
I didn't hear a build-up specifically about me. I listened to
Do you want me to make it more about you? Would that be better?
Considering that this is theoretically about last night, the notion that this would be at all about me is eyebrow raising. But no, I heard bits of your intro when you first went live, and that's it.
All right.
Am I behind the curve on something that I need to be prefaced with?
No, I guess starting off is like I just want to know what your takeaway was, what your thoughts were, because I mean, I don't even know. Did you grow up kind of? I mean, what was Denver like? What was your kind of like growing up?
I feel very lucky to have grown up in a swing state, because the lack of monolithic political ideology, I think, gave me a very different view than if I grew up somewhere where it's just a given that everything is X and everything to the contrary is wrong by default. Denver is Colorado is in a way like Texas, in the way that Austin is a rather, strong sort of left-leaning outpost in a sea of red. The difference being that the population of Denver about equalizes that with the rest of the state. So they are consistently a swing state, even though the core of Denver tends to vote blue and the rest of state tends to vote red. So I wasn't like hyper political growing up. I wasn't one of those kids joining like the Model UN and running for student council and all that kind of stuff. But I was always fascinated by it, but infinitely more so as an adult. And I think the fact that I also come from a family that's wildly mixed bag. I have family that are rather diehard on both ends, and that comes from, I have a bunch of family that are like sort of typical modern secular Jews, although living in Arkansas, bafflingly, but who are classic in that way, tend to be very democratic voting. Although I certainly had some others that were just extremely Republican, and so much so that I always thought it's actually surprising to me that that Jews are not more typically Republican. Something about that seems like it would be intuitive, but
see, I disagree. I feel like historically that is true. Like there is a
maybe historically, but today
I don't know.
I don't know. But I don't know actually the history of the voting trends.
Yeah, walking around even my neighborhood is, you're going to see more Biden-Harris signs and you're going to see Trump sign. Matter of fact, the only Trump, I had this weird response too. One of my neighbors walking around, and these people are like probably first generation, like they grew up in either, I think came from Israel. I'm not sure. And, good dude, super nice guy. Older couple, 70s or 80s. And walked past and we were walking with travelers, and I waved to him and I looked up and he just kind of like called his name and I said, "Hey man," and turned around and there's this big red shirt. And I was like, "Really?" I was like, I guess so. And predominantly, I think the reason why is because historically the Republican Party has made more of an
overture to Israel.
Yeah, and it has definitely been more of an affiliate or an ally. By the way, I'm not using rabbit ears disparagingly. I'm doing it because that is those are not my words. These are just an observation, a objective observation that historically Republican Party has been more about we need to protect and reaffirm Israel's independence as a nation since 1947. So anyway, I pulled focus away from that because it kind of pinged my ear. But I am curious, just kind of like as an overall, you watching the. Did you watch last night? I'm making an assumption. Okay.
No, I did. I was trying to multitask.
As you are oft to do.
Because I was like, my general attitude going in was this will not be worth my time. My attitude towards all politicians is that none of them are worth anyone's time. I have a very, very omnipresent disgust for politicians. And that is equal opportunity. To me, it was a guy attempting to be polite while to varying degrees, two assholes threw slings and arrows at each other. And I say to varying degrees because I would never claim that that Trump has met his match in assholery. But in my mind, the notion of a statesman is just utterly non-existent.
Do you think it's an antiquated thing? Like it no longer applies to our society?
It might be, certainly at a federal level. But because I think that there are people who are, if you go down to the city council level and things like that, through the charity work that I do here in LA, we deal with, because we're an LA charity, we deal with local politicians fairly regularly, like not even Garcetti, but like the mayor of Burbank, that kind of thing. And on some level, all politicians are a byproduct of a general quest for power. And so I'm just automatically skeptical. The instant someone even expresses interest in it, I'm immediately skeptical of their goals. But I'm also willing to believe that, I'm also, I should say not willing to believe, I am extremely predisposed to benefit of the doubt. But yeah, my summary, I mean, look, there's a lot to get into potentially, and I won't be able to stay forever, but I don't know how long you're planning on going, but I know that you and I could easily just, if we were in a room, yeah, if we don't have a room with like a view of the horizon line, the sun could potentially rise and fall multiple times before we'd be aware how long it's been. So but my cliche response to watching it is that as someone who has always been about policy and always been about outcome and never given a damn about party, I don't go into it. I try to go into it as dispassionately as possible. It's difficult, so it's basically impossible, but I try. And my takeaway is the same that I always have with these: is that there is no winner, there is only a loser, and it's us. And that's kind of a cliche, but to me it's a fact. I mean, the whole thing was poorly conceived, and it's worth noting, by the way, that right as you went live, New York Times said a headline that the Commission on Presidential Debates said it would change the format for future debates after Trump's interruptions of Joe Biden. They did not say what that format would be, but God knows that would be a welcome change, because if nothing else, just two people talking over each other endlessly, even if they were both just awash in brilliant ideas and not just talking points or ad hominem nonsense, it's just incoherent. Even notwithstanding the attempted or lack of attempted content, it's just incoherent.
Yeah.
If they're both not interested in listening and responding, which I don't think either of them are, but obviously Trump never cares about anybody else.
Well, it just feels like satire. It's to the point where so much logic is out the window that it now feels like we're watching an actual South Park episode. Troy, I mean, you made a great point early on that, what was it, choosing between a douchebag and a what?
Giant douche and a turd sandwich. That's right.
and a turd sandwich. I don't
Vote
know
or
if
die,
that's-
motherfucker.
Vote or die, motherfucker. Vote or die.
I don't know if it's ever been more clear that we're choosing between two different people that are both out of touch or too lambastic to actually do any good. And I agree with you, Austin. I mean, it's coming down to, like, I don't vote party. I don't understand why that's a necessary part of this American two-party system. And I'm with you there. It's about outcome, and I don't think, it seems to me, and hopefully I can speak humbly here, that the outcomes either way aren't good for the poorest of America or the people that are oppressed and feel certain ways about not just the history of America, but the current state of things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also think that the nature of governance in this country has evolved a lot in a couple of centuries, and we've stretched the original conception of it to hopefully not a breaking point, but what often feels close to a breaking point, insofar as presidents are not. It looked like a debate amongst would-be monarchs, and it always feels like that to me, where they speak to this notion of, put me in charge and I will do this litany of things to make your life better. And I'm like, you're not here to make my life better. You're here as a check on the legislature, and their job is to try to make life better, or at least less worse. And so too are they a check on you. And this often is just framed as like, put me in charge. Day one, I'm going to do this. Day two, I'm going to do this. Day three, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, hell no, you're not. I don't give a fuck if I agree with it. That's not how this works.
That is a very important distinction that I think gets lost, because I feel that we do have representative democracy, right? We have the whole point is you're supposed to elect officials to speak on your behalf. That is what the Congress is for. That's what Senate is for. That's what governors are for. It's representative democracy. So, and we can argue that later, because people go, it's a constitutional democracy, whatever. It's the fact that we are supposed, there's a whole reason why we have an election is because you're like, I need to have agency in what's happening in my country. Therefore, what I say is I want this person because I believe that he best reflects my views. That has been a very important, critical, foundational distinction that has completely fallen by the wayside. And I grew up in a kind of environment that said, if you believe in this one person, you don't have to do anything other than believe in him and he will save you. And I don't believe that even Christ meant to preach that message at all. It is about us doing things to make this world better. And this person, like Austin said, is supposed to check those things. There's three parts of our government. There's the judicial, there's the legislative, and there's the executive. Someone who comes in and goes, we've done more than anybody else. It's like, that's not your job. Your job is to do exactly what I talked about in the very beginning, which is to live harmoniously within these three things. And I don't ever want to see...
Actually, I totally... Can I just...
Please. This is what I love about you.
I don't think it's supposed to be harmonious. That's the thing.
It's supposed to be contentious, right?
Yes, exactly. Like, it doesn't have to be uncivil, but the whole idea is that these, like, I often find myself at odds with people who think that governmental gridlock is by definition bad. I'm like, it was quite literally designed for that. If it was easy to get things through, then it would be failing in its fundamental charge. Like,
sure.
The whole point is it's supposed to be like this Darwinian process that only the things that everybody truly agrees on can actually get made. And so that this notion, that's why for me, my general standing predisposition is under a Trump presidency, I would wish for a Democratic Congress, and if Biden wins, then I only hope for a Republican Congress, because they left unchecked, both parties, from my perspective, are capable of enormous.
I agree with that. The problem is that, like you said before, the people are the ones who lose, because if there is a failure in this people will goes, it's November that matters. I'm like, that's not true. And by the way, we put in a description here to vote. Different people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's again the beauty of all of this. If you don't vote, I kind of don't want to talk to you. Like I have no, especially when it's going to be commentary. But I want to hear everybody. I want to talk to everybody. But if you don't, at least people go, well, I'm just going to abstain. I was like, well, that's not how this works. And not only are you abstaining from the presidential election, but that's not the only election that happens in November or right now, actually. There's a litany of candidates that affect government that are on the ballot besides Biden and Trump. And if you think
and legislation,
and that's going to happen every 2 years. So you have this. If you really get frustrated and you really get bent out of shape and you really feel passionate about your political views, which, by the way, people say, oh, don't talk about politics and religion. Like, those are the only two things we should be talking about. Why are we here and who's doing something about it? That's the only conversation. Everything else kind of filters down from there. But if you don't want to actively be involved, that's great. I disagree with you, but the beauty of our government is that you have the right to vote or you have the right to not vote. I just don't understand why someone would say, I feel strongly about this, but I'm not going to in any way try to affect change. And again, we can get into the whole conversation of the Electoral College and how that archaic system, in my opinion, has completely failed. But if it's a representative democracy and people go, we, by the majority, voted that this ideals, the system of governance is what we feel is best for this country for these 4 years, then that should be, if you have a gridlocked government, nothing gets done. By and large, people thought that there was like a majority, and don't ask me to quote polls, but we can look it up. Most of the people in this country thought that there needed to be some kind of gun reform, some kind of system put in place after the amount of mass shootings that we were having, that there needed to be something. And nothing has ever happened. That is mind-boggling. And the reason why is because you have this gridlocked government.
Actually, I think it's because they don't.
Pew Research Center, sorry, Austin, percentage of Americans who favor stricter gun laws is on an all-time rise. And the Pew Research Center survey conducted in September found that 60% of Americans say gun laws should be tougher, up from 57 last year and 52 in 2017. So that's just what's happening. That's what Americans want, obviously.
Sure.
Well,
Awesome. What are you going to say?
At least 60% of them. But I think the reason why is because the notion of there being political will to do something, like 60% of people could say they favor it, but as soon as things escape out of the headlines, the politicians are just they're gonna move on because they function like YouTubers, like what's trending.
Sure.
How do I get my clicks? And in their case, how do I get donations
or donations, yeah,
and all the above. And so it's whatever the kind of trending topic is, and this is where like there's a lot of very like something that I like. I don't like the presentation, but something that I like a lot of the time about John Oliver is he'll focus on things that are way outside the political headlines of the moment.
Right.
And say like, this is a thing that is very politically unsexy.
But he also has a tendency to take that. He goes, and here's what it applies to right now.
Yeah,
here's why this thing is happening. It's not like it's not an evergreen story. It's like, this is impact. This is why this is important right now. And I do believe, if you're not watching John Oliver, I do not believe that John Oliver should be your source of news. However, his commentary, although quite often very impassioned and has definitely been so more so in the last few weeks, his arguments make so much sense. And the one that he did last Sunday about the Electoral College and the Supreme Court makes a lot of sense.
I find that I'm not. What I don't like about John Oliver is he's offering a very, like, you could argue because his show is called John Oliver and we're watching a guy called John Oliver talk about John Oliver's view, it would be very easy to remember that we are hearing very specifically he and I guess his writer's view.
Sure.
I don't like that it's sort of presentation. This kind of comes to a thing we got into about journalism on Play, Watch, Listen once, but things are often presented as though they are fact when they are actually highly contended conclusions. And it's always there's a lot of folks that make it their business to do rebuttal videos to every one of his videos. And I always find watching them as a pair is the best way to go, because I'll find that he presents a compelling case. It's hard to not viscerally respond. Yeah, fuck yeah, give me the paper, I'll do it right now. But then it's just like there's a lot of like, it's an ideological posture with a lot of those, as everyone is. I mean, and how do we not, especially if you care? And I wouldn't expect anything different. But like you said, don't fall into the trap of calling it news. But that's what, just to go back to what you said a minute ago about gun control and the notion of political will, the thing that I always find so frustrating is that they'll give the big speeches. Yes, we have to do this, blah, 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 blah. But they're doing that because it's trending. I guess I already said it, but to me, it doesn't matter if it's a good idea or if it's a bad idea. What matters, that's why they're chasing the kind of short-term gains. This is something you see a lot when, like one of my least favorite things is the kind of political weaponization of science, as if science is a thing. I can't stand, and to be clear, I have equal hatred of the left and the right, but I can't stand, as much as I agree often, I hate the often liberal line of I stand with science or something to that effect, because I'm like, science isn't a thing to stand with. Science is a debate. Science is an ongoing discussion. Science often proves itself wrong by proving itself right, and then does it again the next day and again the next day. And so if you believe in science, your takeaway should be to fucking wait and pause and let the churn continue. But it's so often used as no, this is settled. Some person that I have deigned the God of science has said such, and because that corresponds to my political leanings, I have now declared that this is the science, and if you are not in agreement with this, or if you're even skeptical of this, or even just open-mindedly unconvinced of this, you are now anti-science. And I'm like, what the fuck? By virtue of saying that, you have proven you don't know the fucking first thing about science. And the reason I bring it up is because something that Neil deGrasse Tyson has often said while complaining about the way the politics interact with science is that science is operating on a long game. I mean, hell, a couple of years ago, the LISA measuring gravitational waves for the first time was validating a hypothesis of Einstein made damn near a century earlier. Right. Science doesn't operate in 2 and 4 year and 6 year congressional terms. And that's something that, because everybody's always about how can this help my district now? How can this help my fundraising now? What have you done for me lately? You can't really shoehorn science into that. And so whenever it's used as a football to kick back and forth, which is nonsensical, it's a way of thinking. It's a mindset. It's not a thing. It's also just largely incompatible with the short life cycle idea. And I'm kind of on a tangent. It has nothing to do with the debate, but it's just a pet peeve that I see. And both, to be clear, both sides do this, but I see it's kind of become a little bit of a liberal like catchphrase.
I think one of the reasons why, though, is because something that has happened over the last 4 years is that whereas before, and this is what I have observed, whereas before it's kind of like, well, I mean, it's kind of got some good points. Well, it's kind of got some good points here. What we have seen is just these hard lines It's the binary, this or this. It's either this or that. Like you said, it's either you're with science or you're anti-science, as opposed to even scientists going, oh, we're just saying to the best of our knowledge. And there's always kind of that qualifier before they say anything, is like, to the best of our knowledge, what we can see is that these activities and this specific, these components are leading to the erosion of our environment. And we call that climate change. We're not even saying global warming anymore. We're saying climate change. Oh, no. You said global warming, and it's today it's 4 degrees cooler. Therefore, that disproves that. And like, no, that's not what we're saying at all. We're just saying that you.
Oh yeah, that's so painful.
The thing that when I remember all the pictures that people were taking, especially of Los Angeles, when we were hardcore lockdown, nobody was going out in their cars, and all of a sudden it was like, look at downtown, and you could make out clearly the buildings and how just in a matter of like a few days, how different the city skyline looked, because there wasn't all of this car pollution, which that's what cars do. That's why you have an exhaust pipe. Out of that pipe comes exhaust, and that just goes somewhere, and it naturally rises up into the atmosphere, but not into space. It hovers, and that is what causes smog. And to be able to look at it and go, we can see a difference there. That's empirical. That's basically looking at the Earth and going, it is a sphere, it is a ball. I'm seeing it with my own eyes. And to go, there's no such thing as climate change, as is such a flat dismissal of that, is insane. To not say
that, to me, that anybody that says that it has succumbed to total tribalism, where they've gotten it. It's very often Republicans that go into this knee-jerk mode of climate change is some kind of hoax. To me, the nuance is what is driving climate change, and at what rate? Because the fact of the matter is that most climate models, people have been saying for many decades that we're on the precipice of climactic climate change and that the world is going to be doomed in a matter of days. I mean, there are famous examples also of people saying, overpopulation will lead to global starvation by, 1980.
Sure.
I mean, it's like, so the problem is there's a consistent hubris in thinking, okay, now we've got all the variables understood. And it's like, I think you're really underestimating just how complex the system is. So anybody who's reasonable, I don't think could possibly deny climate change. But where it gets interesting and where I love to read all the back and forth is that down at the hard science, hard data level, and just the analysis of everything that we've got, which is woefully incomplete, how fast it's changing, and based on, giant, like geologic timescale sized oscillations of temperature that have always happened. There have been times in our history where it's colder and hotter both than right now. Like all of those things have to be factored. And to me, anybody sensible would say it's clear that the Industrial Revolution and onward has added a variable to this equation that is massive. Is it enough to completely supplant natural processes? Maybe. It certainly looks that way, but that's where, if you truly believe in science, then it would say, well, look, I got into a debate about this actually last night with a friend, where I say, this is why I'm never a fan of giant federal level presidential debates, as if they're going to say, look, here's how I'm going to solve it. Where I'm like, I think this one ends up falling to individuals. Like, I have looked around my life and said, I don't consider myself honestly convinced. I have a lot of friends. I have friends at NASA. I have friends at JPL. I have friends in the sciences in general. We have our mutual friends like Alice Roberts, Carolyn Porco, etc., who generally all fall in one line of this. And I don't take their opinions lightly. I also do occasionally read articles that say there is a politicization of the scientific research, and that grants and things like that are so tied up with this, that there's a tribalism going on just even on the basic level of what research is being done, and that that within like climatologist world, you're considered a heretic to even sort of skeptically approach this, which to me means that that's science being broken fundamentally. Like there should never be, heresy should be fundamentally impossible in science. So I read enough articles from people saying I was practically booed out of academia for saying, you know, I'm not sure that that's what the data reads. So I see that, and that red flags for me, even though a lot of scientists I respect and admire and have no reason to doubt would say, look, this is a done deal. This is understood. And I say, yeah, it's true. But we've also said that a bunch of times before. I think you're probably right, but I just can't help but think 50 and 100 years from now, if they'll be looking back and going, "Oh, those poor fools."
Hopefully, right? That's what we hope for. And this is, and I know you believe this too. That, and we've gotten so like, I see how easy it is to get off topic, or, and more importantly, to zero in on something and to lose the global perspective of everything, because climate change is a huge issue. Whether you are for it or against it, or for it or against it, whether you believe that it's a thing or not. It is a issue because there are people that are impassioned and have strong positions on it, and any political leader should be able to reflect that in their platforms. However, it does affect so many other things. Nothing is compartmentalized. This is a systemic government, and one thing affects the other, which is why it's not so easy, which is why gun control is not an easy issue, which is why abortion is not an easy issue, which is why climate change is not an easy issue, because in the same way that somebody said, well, it's really simple. Governor Newsom just said, 15 years from now, I am banning the use of combustible engines. No more gas-powered cars. That to me is an easy thing to do.
Well, and for what it's worth, I think it was that they can't be sold here anymore.
They can't be sold. Right.
Legal to own one.
They're not going to sell anymore until for like another, I think it's 2035 or something. But don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure.
I don't remember either.
But it is the notion of like, hey, we did a ban on catalytic converters, or we said it was you could not be in a car unless it had a catalytic converter. There's emissions levels that you must pass in order to have your car on the road. We've done this before. This is just an evolution of that. However, if I asked somebody once, it was like, if they said no more electric car, or no more gas cars, all electric, they're like, that'd be the best thing ever. I'm like, immediately, like, yes, immediately, like, great. You just, without any system in place, without any infrastructure, you just caused one of the highest level of unemployment, this is before COVID, ever, because you just displaced hundreds of thousands of people, because you didn't give people a system and time to adapt. Now, I think that you should give people a system and time to adapt to that, because you're like, this is where we have to go, because look at Los Angeles and look at that city. And not every city is Los Angeles. I understand that. But you have to be able to look at that and go, California, there's not some invisible wall that separates it from everything else. This affects everything. The water goes into here. We get fish from here. It's like all of these things impact each other. So I understand that it's not just a clear-cut thing. Austin Wintory. I want to find out what other people think too, because you and I could talk about this ad nauseum.
I mean, just to wrap up what I was saying, because I realized, I did kind of wind myself way off the target. The point I was making.
I love you.
When I hear them talking about climate change in a presidential debate, I'm like, I just don't realistically think that anything will happen there on a federal level. You know, like if California wants to ban the sale of like, I generally favor states' rights, and I
state sovereignty.
If states want to have individual policies to varying degrees there, that's within their right, and their respective populations, which are going to be generally more homogenous and less like, I just, you know, if a political movement begins in California that is at odds with elsewhere in the country, I like the idea that Californians would be able to sort of self-governingly say, this is how it's going to be around here, and if that works for you, you're welcome, and if it's not, you know, there's 49 or maybe 51 other states that you can hopefully be happy in, and I generally support that, and so that's why, you know, those kinds of state initiatives and even better local initiatives I tend to support. That's why I look at it, you know, because of the mechanisms of climate change are so complicated. And because, like you said, there isn't an invisible border between, never mind California, but the US and all the rest of the countries of the world. The only possible federal, just purely practically speaking, the only federal impact that I can see, maybe I'm unimaginative. I say that genuinely. I could be missing something or a lot of things, but to me, it seems that the only solutions that could possibly work from a federal level are so powerfully draconian
that they border on like.
They don't even border on authoritarianism. They
Yeah.
must be by definition. They would have to be, because it would be like what you just said. It's not let's stop selling this thing. It's like, okay, by this date, like Australia's mandatory gun buyback, like something on that level of this is not an option.
Yeah.
Like even if we give you money for it, never mind the fact that they don't even talk about our $27 trillion debt. But let's just say we're going to give everybody a check for their gas-powered vehicle, and we've written $1 trillion check to Elon Musk, and now everyone is going to be given an electric vehicle in America in exchange at a below-market rate. Let's say they come up with some just outrageous plan. It would take. I mean, there would be people that just by virtue of the fact that the government is willing this, they would oppose it. Again, especially if it's like a deep red state and it was a Biden administration, or vice versa. If it was a Trump administrative move, like there would be reasons to somehow now hate that in California, New York, Washington, Oregon, et cetera, because they just can't help but hate when it's the other guy. And so that's why I look at that and I say, I would much like I saw an ad. Amazon said, our plan is to be completely carbon neutral by such and such date. I see this commercial on TV all the time. And like, I look around here at my studio and I'm on a daily basis. I say, what can I do to be more carbon neutral in my life?
Sure.
And what can I do to evangelize for that? Because I find those kinds of solutions tend to be the ones that actually get done. Especially because, as the culture changes, companies, just out of a desire to have more customers, will realize it's in their interest. They'll see people saying, "Ooh, I like supporting green." How many Shark Tank pitches are like, "We're going to give every sale, we're going to give $1 to this, green initiative, or this, pollution cleanup program, or this, that, or the other." Like people want to know they're buying into that. I'm like, those solutions tend to be more effective in my mind, unless the government is willing to go full authoritarian.
I agree, but this is why I definitely believe that it has to come. I flip it back and say we have to put the power back into the people's hands, and sometimes that comes through education. Education.
How is that not agreeing?
Well, no. It's. I agree with you completely. It is the missing component, the key component is education, and education only comes through conversation, through discourse. The second you go, no longer listening, absolutely not, then you are inviting that kind of authoritarian as the only option, because it's a parent that has to come in and go, all right, fine, nobody gets this anymore, as opposed to being able to calmly and rationally discuss. All right, I got to get it to other people. Hold on. Well, hold on. Are we saying goodbye to Austin right now? We're saying goodbye to Austin.
I don't need to dominate.
No, you're not dominating. I want to get to, I know that there's, Tom, you have people lined up, right?
Yes, we have two people.
Well, then there we go. I really want to know, and as I'm kind of going through and just kind of looking at Twitter and stuff like that, which is just always the worst thing to do sometimes. But I'm very curious as to how people are processing this, and just even a microcosmic view of this, when people go, I don't even want to hear anything you have to say. I can't believe you're doing this. And it's like, oh, well, that's kind of the point of why I feel we have to. There's two types of people that run away from a fire and people that run into it. And I am the person that's going to run into it, sometimes to my own detriment. But I'm compelled to understand more about people, because the more that I understand about people, the more that I understand about myself. So the people that want to say, I don't want to understand anything about this, probably are the people that don't want to learn more about themselves and aren't doing the work on themselves. David, you had something you want to add to what?
Agree more.
Well, I was just going to say, it kind of sounds like we're circling this idea that the American representative system is chasing around the populist idea of what's important, right? So one of these beautiful speed bumps that keeps politicians maybe centered, but also running around with American or the populist idea of what's important right now and kind of playing whack-a-mole. Oh, okay, well, you guys want to talk about Trump's taxes right now? Okay, run over there, everyone. That's all we're talking about right now. And even the news media is doing something similar. So I'm curious what you would say to that in that, either of you, and even Tom, what you would say to the idea that we've kind of become this cyclical, okay, the news media is going to influence how everyone is talking about fear, so will social media. And so if all of those groups are working together talking about a similar thing, then the politicians are going to bring it back up, and we're going to go over and over these same issues. And no matter what science says about it, there is the populace having fear about a thing that will drive it to be one of the main topics of conversation. And I just see that so clearly in the debate last night. I see so clearly that news media is influencing exactly what the debate is, as well as social media. And that, I think, gets dangerous, but I don't know. I don't have anything else. That's all I've got. I'm not a...
No, I definitely think that, look, we're trying to do whatever we can. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to get people to stand up and pay attention and say, and fear is still the most, I disagree with this, but fear is a very compelling weapon. And that's what, by and large, is it's such the go-to, as opposed to, and I remember Richard Dreyfuss said this once, and we were doing this con together in Australia, and he goes, you can't scream reason, because and he goes, that's why crazy always wins, is because they just get louder. You can't scream reason because you're automatically predisposed to be rational, and rational people don't scream. They just, typically, what you see is the people that are the most rational, the most logical, the ones that are listening, as opposed to talking. It's like a poker table. The people that you want to be afraid of are not the ones that are going all in every hand. It's the people that are sitting back and waiting for their cards.
Wasn't that the whole MO of the Spartans? Is that part of what made them terrifying? Phalanx of them is that they would stand there in complete silence and stoicism on the battlefield. They wouldn't be doing the whole bang on the shield and make a lot of noise.
No, it was, and the beauty of that is because if today I die, then I die. And that to me is a very powerful thing. It's no longer, once you're truly fearless, once you operate out of a place of fear, then you have surrendered to that fear. When you are,
fear is the mind killer.
Fear is the mind killer. That's a great plug for your show, David. 1 o'clock.
Happening in a half an hour, ladies and gentlemen.
Austin, thank you. I want to see what these other two people, or if there's.
I will self-regulate, but I'd love to. It's a lot easier to hear if I can hang. If it screws up your form,
I am always happy to have you here. Tom, who do we have?
We have Ash coming. Ashcan.
Hey yo,
right now.
Ash, bring her in.
Him. Ashcan.
Oh, Ash. Oh, a different Ashcan. Oh, that's yeah. I think you're talking about Ash Nerd Fangirl. I'm so all over the place right now.
Oh, hey.
Dude.
Hold on.
You are looking, look at that mustache, bro. I mustache you to.
Yeah, it started as a bit to scare my girlfriend, and then I kind of like.
He's now full mustache.
And now you're full mustache.
Now we mustache you your comments on the...
All right, what's your question? What's your comment?
Well, I put in two. One was, what do you guys think intersectionality and intersectional identities take into people kind of like swaying towards who they want to vote for? And also another one I commented was, what's your guys' take on the phrase voting your conscience? Because my take is that when people always tell me, oh, just vote your conscience, that's kind of like an easy out for being like, you have the privilege to choose somebody that follows your views, when there are people who are in minority communities who, like me, who I'm not 100% on board with Biden, but I'm going to be voting for him because he's going to be the one who's going to be most likely to protect current rights of me and my loved ones.
Isn't that you voting your conscience then? I mean, isn't that you then voting your conscience?
But what I'm saying is that it's voting your conscience is.
No, let's just find that. I think it's important to define what that means voting your conscience, what does that mean?
I think voting your conscience for me really is somebody, it's like we talk about the two-party system and now there's a third party with, I had a friend who,
Kanye?
oh God, no, honestly, Kanye being at the debate yesterday probably would have made it even more entertaining.
One step closer to Idiocracy. If you haven't seen that movie, then that's
oh no, I
that's
love
the only
that
thing
movie.
would
That
have been.
movie came out way before,
It was before its time.
It was so much before its time.
Voting your
No.
conscience, what does that mean?
I assume you're referring to like Joe Jorgensen, the
Hmm?
libertarian candidate.
Yeah, because
or
I had a
Green
friend
Party candidate or something.
who voted, he's like, I don't feel, this is during the 2016, I don't feel the need to vote for the Democrat or the Republican because they don't suit my needs. I feel like I need to vote my conscience. When I have other friends who are like, I am going to look at these candidates and I don't agree with this person that much, but I know that overall they're going to have a more positive impact on the government.
This is, dude, you bring up a really strong point, which is how do you define voting your conscience? It's almost like, say, we can sit here and discuss altruism. Does true altruism exist? Or are you only doing this because when you give, when you sacrifice, you gain a good feeling off of that? So can you ever really, truly be altruistic? And I think that you just described to me, voting your conscience, like, look, these are not necessarily my personal views, but because I feel like this is what's better for the country, I'm going to sacrifice what I believe my personal. There was someone, and I was hoping he was going to join us for this. I had to look through my Twitter. I don't want to misquote your name, but he brought specifically up a point of saying, like, under a Trump presidency, I have been able to do better in the stock market because the economy is doing so good, and because of that, I have been able to give back to my community. I'm like, dude, that is fantastic. There's a lot of good that can come. Like, the pyramids were built by the use of slaves. You know, there's a lot of things you could accomplish, great things that you can accomplish, if you don't mind a little bit of opposition or oppression and suppression and the by and large the exploitation of other people. There's always a cost. You can benefit greatly. I was flabbergasted to learn, and Austin, you were the one that brought this up, talking about step in if I'm misquoting you. By and large, most of what we know about scuba and how the body works and the amount of pain and what happens to a body when you do these despicable things to them. Like, the reason why we know how the proper mixture for scuba tanks and what happens with the body at certain pressure points and all that kind of things is because of what happened to the Jews during World War II and the concentration camps. They performed these despicable acts on humans under the guise of, quote, medical science, and saying, let's find out what happens to the human body when we do X to it. Now, does that mean that we should not? It's like, I can't scuba dive because I have a moral, opposition to the reason why this thing was. Or can you benefit from that? It creates this huge paradox and this conundrum. I'm not saying that, or I'm not fighting against that. Voting your conscience. I just found an interesting article. The Idiot's Guide to Voting Your Conscience. It said millions of voters are torn between the two most unpopular candidates in modern history. Here is how they may articulate their grievances. That article was written November 7th, 2016. This play has played itself out. It's always a giant douche or a turd sandwich. You're always going to somehow.
It's also the most important election of our life.
No, because
and
we're
by and
basically
large-
voting the soul of the country.
Yeah, I mean, I can look at it and go, true. We've never been anybody. Here's what I find flabbergasting. Is that a word? Look it up.
Yeah, I think so.
Honestly, it's the same amount of work. I think I heard hoopla at least most during that debate last night than any other point in my entire
Somebody
life.
sent me a thing. It was like, do a shot every time you hear this. And it was like, A, it's scary how much this was accurate about both candidates. And B, I would have been like in my 20s drunk had I abided by those rules. The thing that I don't understand, and I am compelled to find out why, is anyone who says we're doing great. the economy is doing great. We're doing better than we've ever done, as opposed to going, guys, it's not good right now. Anybody that cannot objectively look and go, you have to, if you want to go outside, you have to wear a mask.
Well, no one would say now we're doing great.
That's not what Trump said last night. I don't want to misquote him, but he was like, I think we're doing great. We're trending up.
I think he was talking about before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I think it was right up until the pandemic. There was definitely a lot of growth by various metrics. I mean, again, this is one of those where it all depends on how you look at it. But as you know, GDP, unemployment numbers, those are the metrics he would certainly be looking at.
That he would look at. But again, I want to point out but when the majority of American citizens do not make enough to pay taxes, that means that the minority of Americans are the ones that are paying the most taxes. Okay, so that also means that the majority of people are not investing in the stock market. Wall Street does not equal the strength of Wall Street does not equal the strength of our economy. That simply means that this one thing, it's like saying Apple's doing really, really well. So I guess we're doing well as a country. I mean, they're doing really, really well. So therefore that somehow this funnels down to us, which is the bullshit that Reagan did, back in the 80s with trickle-down economics, that this would all just somehow go to the lower class. It's like, no, there's a stopgap between these people because you only are able to participate that if you were participating in that. And last year, Pam and I finally, and I have to give credit to her, I have finally, and I was fucking frivolous with money for the longest time because I lived under the auspices of life is short and I better get mine now because I grew up without. And Pam was finally like, hey, we may die tomorrow, but on the off chance that we don't, can we please start planning for our future? And especially when Traveler came into the play, I was like, I have a moral obligation to this human to make sure that I set him up for success because I wasn't. So that means I want to plan for his education. That means I want to plan if something happens to Pam and I that he's taken care of. And so we started putting in all these measures. And last year, we took a huge hit in our retirement account. And that is what the stock market is doing better than ever. It's like, I lost a lot of money. Now, it doesn't matter because if you look at it, it looks like if you zoom in, it looks like an EKG. If you zoom out, it's on an upward trend. But the majority of America is not having that conversation. The majority of America right now is saying, I don't know how I'm going to pay for my rent. I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids. I don't know how I'm going to pay for my credit card debt. I don't know how I'm going to pay for my medical debt. That's why I look at it and go, regardless, Ashkan, you bring up a great point. Regardless of what you think about Trump, I don't understand the mindset that says he's the best person for right now, because right now makes zero sense. You're not. Go ahead, Austin.
There's a whole lot of nuance to pull out of every one of those points. And I don't claim to be a walking encyclopedia on any of these subjects. So I just know how the various angles on the debate would express themselves. But specifically to the, just using as one example, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but just using as one example, if you say that the majority of Americans are not paying taxes, I think it's a statement like that just has to be unpacked further, like federal taxes, because federal income taxes, at least a cursory Google would suggest that it's 44% don't pay federal income taxes, but that could also be a reflection on how the tax code is written.
Of course,
there's a lot. There's a lot there, and then that doesn't then dig into the question of, and what about state taxes? What about the fact that every single time we buy something, we're also paying sales taxes and all manner of other ways in which people are taxed. So it's like anytime things are spoken about too monolithically on that subject, it's like, whoa, wait, like let's just try to boil it down a little bit more. But that's kind of a tangent. The question or the point about when someone says, how could they possibly vote for Trump? I know that if you look to, especially like in 2016, I was on election night. I was in Muskegon, Michigan, because the West Michigan Symphony had commissioned a piece from me, and I was in town for the premiere, which was happening like 2 days later.
It's the strangest flex ever, by the way.
It was, well, yeah, clearly, West Michigan Symphony. I mean, they're actually a very good orchestra, but it ain't Carnegie Hall. But it was a fabulous experience. But it was interesting because I had to land in Grand Rapids and then drive through miles and miles and miles and miles of Trump Pence signs before getting to my hotel on election night. And coming from LA, it was like, wow, these are like mythical creatures. I didn't even know there were Trump supporters. I just assumed that was a fiction to scare little children. Because you forget that there's a country with divergent. And the thing is, I drove into downtown and it was one abandoned factory after another. Mm-hmm. And I look at that and I go, it's actually, I remember driving in and I thought, he's going to win, isn't he? And it was still utterly like Hillary's to lose by all conventional wisdom at that moment. And I just thought there's a lot of people. This is why I thought, even though I don't know where I stand, I just remain completely open book on the subject of universal basic income because I just haven't been. But this is why I like Andrew Yang.
I love Andrew Yang too.
Because he spoke to why people actually voted for Trump more than every Democrat was like, look, let's just forget about the people that voted for Trump because they are the basket of deplorables, as Hillary probably regretfully said. And to me, that's horrible. Like the idea of just having no compassion for and no even curiosity as to why someone would vote and just assuming the most uncharitable, horrible possible reason, ascribing your interpretation of the worst qualities of your rival onto anybody that might agree with even some portion of what they have to say. Whereas I look and I say, I'm just perhaps wired for too much empathy and compassion, but I look and I saw there's a bunch of people in a sector that America is increasingly not interested in, and these jobs are finding themselves elsewhere in the world more and more and more, and there are millions of people, and then here comes a politician who's brash and loudmouthed, who doesn't give a fuck about anything, and says, I'll get your job back because fuck those Chinese and fuck those Mexicans and fuck those that.
And this goes back to something we said. Well, yeah, and this goes back to something I said earlier.
Whether he could do any of that or not, just as a
right.
I'm not suggesting he even has the power to do that, or if it's right. But that is why I see him being voted for, and I'll shut up.
The reason, just quickly, Ashkan, because I do want to get to you.
Sure.
The reason why, and we talked about this earlier, kind of touched on it. The president saying that that this is my views and this is my voice. It's like that's not the role of the presidency. The role of the presidency is to speak the will of the people and have the voice of the people. The scary thing is that there are a lot of people that exactly what you said that do feel it was like, yeah, I'm going to do this and I feel this way. And aren't you kind of tired of all this? And don't you want someone who speaks a little differently than all these politicians do? And he speaks in hyperbole, like majority of people do. You go on Twitter, and it's I am obsessed, I am devastated, I am destroyed, I am.
No,
it's like there's no grasp of the human language. So I understand when people go, I really relate to this person.
Yeah, he's the most us of any candidate in so many regards. He represents our most base self.
Right.
I feel like we're zooming out here. Ashkan, I kind of want to get back to what you said at the end of the sentence here, where you said people in minorities communities have to vote for who is going to be the safest bet to preserve their human rights. I don't know. I hear this conversation about our deficit and climate change, but I think a vast majority of minority communities are trying to vote for who is going to keep their actual lives and their actual families safe.
Strong point.
And that's why I kind of want to bring it back to you, and because that conversation has elevated in importance, rightfully so, over the last few years.
Well, and even more importantly, over the last 6 months, that has
Sure.
become such an important thing. So,
Thank God.
and it's not just about you know, well, this has always been like how do we get the, you know, the people of color, how do we get the minority vote, which is just automatically to me a disparagement, because it immediately disfranchises people. But you're right, David. This is a critical component to, and I don't believe there's ever been a time, unless you want to talk about the '60s, or like either the 1860s or the 1960s, that this has been such a hot button issue. But Ashken, what do you mean when you say that, and just kind of expound on that a little bit more?
Well, I think we saw it yesterday during the debate. We had a president on national TV not condone white supremacy.
What do you want me to say? Just give me a word you want me to say. I was like, how is this so fucking hard?
No, exactly. And the thing about, I've lived in America my entire life. Both my parents are immigrants from Iran. They immigrated over here and they had me, and I've had great access because I was privileged enough to live in Northern Virginia. I'm like 30 minutes outside DC, and which is a very high income area. But one thing that we need to acknowledge is that America is founded on genocide and slavery, and is inherently, our system of government and everything was founded on racial oppression. And when Trump comes out saying, oh, I hate the Chinese, all this other stuff, you have all these followers being like, this guy isn't fighting for me, but he's saying the same things I think, and I'm going to go out and vote for him. And at the end of the 2016 election, we saw those people go out. And earlier when you guys were talking about abortion and gun laws, it just kind of shows how ingrained racism and social class is ingrained in our system. Because
Right.
I learned this a couple months ago, because I'm for gun control, I want all these things. But I saw an interview with Killer Mike from Run the Jewels. He's a rapper, and he talked about how red flag laws that Democrats are pushing don't really work, because if you're flagging people for crimes, the people who are most likely going to get arrested and charged for crimes are people of color or people who are in low income status. So effectively what you're doing is you're disarming the lower class and disarming people of color, and letting everybody else just go off and get as many guns as they want. And also with abortion, that's healthcare. That should be like a basic human right. And another thing is, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, the only people who are not going to have access to get abortions are people who are low income. And if you are rich, you can find a doctor to get like a low-key procedure done. So if anything, all of these things are just ripping the rights away from the lower class and minority individuals.
That's a strong point. And just to make sure, because I was going to see how many people in the country have a red flag law. Red flag law is a gun control law that permits police or family members to petition a state court to order the temporary removal of firearms from a person who may present a danger to others or themselves. So far, there's only 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 states, I believe, 15 including Hawaii, that have a red flag law. There's only one state that has an anti-red flag law, and that's Oklahoma. There is so much that you're right. There's a lot of legislation that seeks to support the upper class or the elites, if you want to use that term, in favor of somebody has to lose. This is what we said at the very, very beginning, right? It's like who won, who lost. It's like the by and large, it's going to be the American people. Somebody's going to lose because not everybody can win. And right now, I feel what's best, and this is my view, and this is the beauty of all this, is like, I don't feel what is in my best interest right now is not what's in the best interest of the country. Because if whatever's going to benefit me most, like right now, in the tax bracket that I'm in, and by the way, just so you understand, I work for a living, all right? I am not by any means independently wealthy. I go to work and I provide for my family. So I'm not this rich aristocratic person. That's not me. But I definitely benefited from having a Republican administration that historically has been better for people in a higher tax bracket. If it goes back to a Democratic administration, which historically is more beneficial for people in the lower income or middle class, I will pay for that.
Yeah.
However, that is what we call balance. And that's what I believe. In some ways, I would much rather be like, we're going to turn over every 4 years, right? If that was the beauty of the original design for the president and the vice president. Whoever lost became vice president. What a great system that was, as opposed to two guys that was like a sycophant and the puppet of the government. So
I wish that were still true.
I wish that were still true. Can you imagine if Trump and Biden had to work together? Holy crap.
Yeah,
I mean, that
Trump
could
and
end up
Hillary.
like, Trump or Hillary had to win. Ashkan, I thank you, man, for not only listening to the conversation, but participating and bringing up something that I think we easily could have overlooked. And I appreciate the fact that you bring with us your life experience and not only yours, but also your parents and how that informs your worldview. And I'm grateful to have you as a part of this, man. I think this is the first time you kind of like stood up as like, hey, I want to be, because you kind of operate always on the outside and the periphery.
Yeah, I just try to keep a low profile. But I think back when one of the comments I made was about intersectional identities, and that's what one thing I love about intersectionality is that I'm a man, but I'm also Persian, and I'm also queer, but also abortion laws don't affect me like other laws. The thing is that we're more than just one person. We're basically multiple identities make us up, and then each part of that can be affected by laws, governments, and I feel like that's just something that needs to be acknowledged.
Let me speak to that real quickly.
Yep.
I grew up in the 80s and the 90s when the worst word you could be called as a boy in Texas was a fag. And that was this, if you got branded that was the worst thing you could ever say. And the reason why is because by and large, we grew up in a conservative Christian home where it wasn't just immoral or socially unacceptable. It was a sin. It was something that would condemn you to the fires of hell. And growing up in that way, I realized that once I became my own person and my own man, there were a lot of things that I had to unpack and go back and go, wait a minute, that I don't believe this. There's no way. And that only came through, that was not a cognitive experiment. That only came from meeting people and developing relationships with people. And I was like, these two guys have one of the strongest relationships I've ever seen. They love each other in a way that movies are written about and that have inspired songs and poetry. These two women understand each other on such a cellular level that I want my relationships to echo theirs and mirror theirs. And I suddenly found myself going, why the fuck is it a conversation about, nobody goes, hey, before we talk about anything, what kind of person do you sleep with? What kind of person are you attracted to? It's not even, there's so many other qualifiers, and we have to put people in categories. The fact that your sexual identity, the fact that your sexual preference I keep talking about this, but Ian, who played Lev in The Last of Us Part 2, did a post that was so great. It's like, hello, friends and enemies. I want to speak to you this real quickly. Here's who I am right now. And that could change. My identity is very fluid because I'm learning about myself. And right now, I use these pronouns. That could change. And I've seen Ian, they change. One day they will wear a dress and full makeup, but the next it is like, that is a dude. And it's just this fluid. I've never seen someone who is more tapped into who they are, and that's all that they care about. They don't care about you. I mean, they care about people, but they don't care about, well, what are you? Are you straight? Are you queer? Where in the LGBTQ plus spectrum do you fall? And the fact that this is even having to be a conversation, I don't understand. And the reason why Republicans and the Conservative Party, I have seen it, I know about this, I can speak to this from experience. The reason why is the second that that brick comes out of the wall, it begins to topple. And there's so many other bricks that have to come out that are deeply connected to it. And at the root of it is, I don't want to understand because it chips away at a fundamental level of my faith. And if I don't fight against it, then that means that I agree with it. And if I agree with it, that means that I've been wrong. So I appreciate, again, you bringing that to the forefront. I don't think it should even be litigated. Sexuality should not be litigated. If you want to be a man or a woman, or you want to identify as neither, you want to be non-binary, or today you want to be a man, fine. How in the world does that make any difference to our government? How in the world does that make any difference to our government?
And I agree. And I think that one of the things that should be discussed within our government is to giving those people access to healthcare.
That is why it's an issue, by the way.
Yeah,
and I could tell people were screaming at right. The reason why is because right now, and up till a few years ago, I couldn't say my partner, who we're the same sex, and that's my life partner that I've been with for 15 years. First of all, we can get married. A marriage exists between a man and a woman. Who says? Who says? And fine, it's a civil union, if you want to call it that. But to be able to benefit from that, that's where the government has to step in and go, okay, we will grant you all of the things that are afforded to these two people. So I understand that, again, it goes back to the fact that this is a systemic thing. You cannot compartmentalize. You can't compartmentalize intersexuality with healthcare. They are so conflated, and they all affect each other. So I get that. I'm not being naive. But I don't understand why people can argue against this. Like, fine, then if nobody cares if I nominate Pam as my beneficiary for insurance, nobody cares. They're like, sure, that's your partner. Why do you care?
No, and I 100% agree. It's just, we're living in a time where people don't like the other, and it scares them, and they don't want to just let people live their lives. Just live their lives and be who they are.
Because somehow that's an affront against mine. And that to me is the whole reason why we're doing this, is because I have to understand where other people are coming from. Don't have to agree. I don't have to promote. But I am compelled to understand, why is it that you hate this thing so much? Why? And that to me is reason to have discourse.
For what it's worth, I would add that.
Please.
You've beautifully articulated why I hate politicians and why I don't like giving them power to do anything. Because I everything that you just said, Troy, well, both of you, I completely resonate with most everything that you just said, and I feel like I have no problem if somebody is, well, I shouldn't say I have no problem, but I don't begrudge, I would never deny someone the right to be, for example, severely homophobic, or transphobic, or fill in any blank of prejudice, bigotry, or even just genuine misunderstanding and kind of being all twisted. I don't think that I don't have the right to feel that way. Where I draw the line is their ability to exercise power over others based on that feeling.
Exactly.
And the problem is, because we can't, because what falls under the norms of sort of moral philosophy is an ever-evolving notion. The safest people tend to be is when we disempower our political system to inflict harm on some subset that it deems dangerous or scary or wrong or sinful or whatever. And that's why I'm like, yeah, it's just that's why I just look around and I say it shouldn't even be on the government's radar. Like, I don't understand the idea of government even being in the marriage business to begin with, because I'm like, you're right. Who the fuck cares who loves who and how? Why should we need a piece of paper to validate that? To me, it makes no sense.
I agree. Ashkan, thank you, man. I really appreciate you contributing to this conversation and, again, pointing us to things that sometimes it's easy for us to discuss as a talking point, but it's always good to hear from someone who's like, yo, I kind of ticked 2 of these boxes real quick, and this is why I have stake in this game.
Yeah, no, and it's kind of interesting when I see people, because I know it's not what they mean, but from where I stand and where a lot of my loved ones and other people that I know stand, who might be Black, other racial identities, or queer or disabled, when they see someone's like, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump, especially after last night, it's kind of like, well, what does that mean about do you care about me? And I think that's an interesting discussion to get into with those people. But you know that when they say that, they're not even considering that.
I believe that most of the people.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
That's true all directions.
There's nobody. If you put someone, the things that we say behind the safety of our, windshield and windows in our car, the insults that all of us have been, myself included, have been guilty of hurling towards other people as they just cut over into our lane, we would never say to somebody in their face. Never. We would never say so that. So the second, but what that is articulating and underscoring and becomes the underpinning of everything that I'm talking about is the second that we introduce relationship and discussion into the mix, I can't say those things to you. It's like, well, hold on. Now you're talking about somebody that I know. And the same way that what pulled me out of my way of thinking was relationship and discussion, I believe that is universally true across the board. I want to move on to a couple other people who've been waiting to add, but Ashkan, first of all, David, hook up with Ashkan. I would love to continue this conversation and learn more about you.
Sure.
I'm really grateful that you took the time to.
Thank you so much, man.
To speak with us. Tom, who else do we have kind of up on the docket, as it were? We've been going for an hour and a half. I saw this, so I appreciate David. I know you've got to start your.
We're good.
You're good. Solid. Awesome.
We're
Kick
good.
ass.
Yeah, I let everybody know we're gonna keep rolling.
Kick
this
ass.
Is good.
Who do we got?
So
Tom?
our next person is Amy B.
Oh,
Or Amy Bennett,
Amy Bennett.
who's joining right now. Hopefully,
Get in here, Amy Bennett. I haven't talked to Amy B in a while. There you are. Hi. Connecting to audio. Look at that little wavy line. We're gonna come up with some cool graphics for all this eventually. There we go. Amy B, yeah, I'm really curious to see what your perspective is on this. What do you got for us?
Well, it is a person's perspective from the outside looking in, and also it's sort of a question based on the fact that I think a lot of countries right now are going through this sort of whirlwind of political extremism, which or people not being heard in particular classes, ethnicities, orientations, and a lot of people feeling fed up and not being heard. And my question really is sort of, especially in the UK, there's a lack of leadership and also a lack of a sustainable opposition, a strong, positive opposition that actually has a chance of not fighting against, but having a chance of debating at least sort of policies or anything, the hard topics that we were talking about earlier, like gun laws, etc. So what, in your opinion, for any candidate, whether it's Trump or Biden, how can candidates break the cycle of people's lack of trust in government that I believe has caused this swing for a lot of countries, not just the US, not just the UK, a lot of countries that people were contesting with at the minute in elections.
God, who wants to take that one? Holy crap!
Well, I know my answer to that.
Go, Austin.
I don't think something should dissuade people's lack of trust in government. I think you should not trust government.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, last night was a perfect demonstration of that. Did either of those people come across as someone that you thought, oh fuck yeah, love that? You know, it was like, I mean, there's no question that Trump was the more aggressively rude asshole, but there was nothing particularly inspiring, for me at least, anywhere. It was just like this mud pit, and that's why I'm like, I would love for them to have as little dominion over my life as possible, because I just don't see how they're not going to fuck up not only my life but people I love. To Ashkan's points, like people I care about, people particularly that don't feel safe in their day-to-day life. I don't want to see those people find themselves on the wrong end of a legislative period, and it's hard for me to see it any other way than like the you know, there's that classic Ben Franklin quote of that government which governs least governs best, and I'm not a pure like dyed in the wool libertarian or anything, but I do find that is something I resonate with, because I just think they don't actually have other people's interests in mind. And why would they? That's not not how you get elected, is by caring about other people. You care about appealing to people's fears and whatnot. So yeah, when I look at the political division, I don't know if I'm answering your question, my apologies. When I look at the political division, I see like people, I don't see it as being inflamed by people's distrust in government. I could be wrong. I'm especially because from within the US, it probably looks very different than from outside the US. And that's where I could stand to learn a lot, actually, I think from a potentially removed perspective. But yeah, the thesis statement was really the first sentence out of my mouth. I don't actually, I think suspicion of the motives of those who exercise power over you by definition of their position is healthy. Don't forget the government, the whims of the government are enforced by law, which is definitionally enforced through violence. You know, like name anything. If you don't do it, you get fined or arrested. That is enforced through police action. And if you resist hard enough and long enough, you'll be met with violence, which is legally mandated violence. And so it's like, I'd like for them to have as little power over people to do that as possible.
Well, I think it's interesting, Amy, that kind of you bring forward that notion, because wasn't it Guy Fawkes that said people should not be afraid of the government should be afraid of the people? And you definitely belong to a country that is no stranger to revolution and the not only the oppression of government upon its people, but also the usurpation of people coming in like that. You gave us imperialism. Your country, like
you personally,
Amy Bennett.
Thanks, Amy. We really appreciate it.
Damn it.
The notion that, you know, this country was an experiment in going, all right, we're going to do it differently, and then of course, because it's inherently made of people, is the reason why it continues to kind of like just the arrow is moving in the direction of entropy, and government is always going to be more or less, you know, a little bit more self feeding on itself. But I do believe that we have an elected government, and every 2 years we get to decide who is a part of that government, and that's why it is incumbent upon the people to vote. I can't say that enough.
I love thinking about. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No. Go ahead.
No, just what you said here. I mean, I'm reading it. The system is stuck in a rut of terms of leadership and having a good, strong opposition running against them. I think so. Like, I love the analogy of a ski slope, right? Where you've got all these skiers going down and everyone's going up and kind of starting off in the same place. And eventually what you have happen is it turns into a sheet of ice because everyone's compacted it down so decidedly. And what it seems like we have, not just in this state or this nation, but more so in the globe, is a deep need for a fresh sheet of snow. And I think that happens because, I mean, we were talking earlier about climate change. I think climate change is going to provide sometimes literally the ash of a new wave of ideas and getting out of the rut of who our parents were. And we're reading Dune right now, and I just can't get beyond the sentence. I'll read it. It's really quick here. There is no escape. We pay for the violence of our ancestors. But we don't just pay for their violence. We also pay for their bad ideas. I'm still paying for the bad ideas of the ultra right, conservative, evangelical, fundamentalist ideas that grew me in a farm in Iowa. You know what I mean? Like, we are all trying to progress, but I do think, against your point, I do think that in a weird sort of way, we are just more aware of the world's oppression more than we ever have been. I don't think it's any worse. I don't think the world is a worse place than it was back 150 years ago when you know, having an actual slave living outside of your home in a shanty was much more prevalent than it is now. Does it happen still? Yes, of course. Does it happen in even California, where we have you know, basically we have a loads of slave labor, or they're getting paid pennies to pick all of our fruits and vegetables? Yes, it does happen. Is the world worse now? I don't think so. And I'm not necessarily thinking that that's your point, but what your point is that, are we stuck in a rut that we can't get out of? And are we stuck in a cycle of distrust or disbelief? No, I actually think that we know much more about Biden and Trump than we would if Biden and Trump were running 50 years ago. And I think information, what we were talking about earlier, we were talking about education, all of this wealth of information that we're going to get, that we are getting because we're so connected, because people care to know about what's happening in our society and have really great tools. I think that's going to be yet another sheet of snow. And I think, call me an idealist, but I really do think the world has been getting better and is going to keep getting better. And we need to focus on the right things, keeping actual physical lives safe, like Ashkan was saying, and worrying about some of the biggest deals in the world, i.e. climate change and things like that. I think will create that sheet of snow that we so desperately need to cleanse us from this rut.
For what it's worth, David, you should check out Steven Pinker, who makes a pretty compelling argument.
I love Pinker.
By far, this is the best time in human history to be alive, basically anywhere on the planet. Like, it's not even, you don't even have to hedge when you say it's probably better than it was 100 years ago. It's better than it was 20 years ago.
I just didn't want to start an argument, but I completely agree. It's much better than it ever has been in the world ever. Completely agree.
Yeah, and that it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking better somehow means like the work is done, which I don't think any sensible person would say. But yeah, I just had to throw that in there because I'm ever the optimist. As much as I speak scathingly about politicians, I am actually an optimist and very idealistic by nature. And I look around and I'm like, I'm fucking grateful to be here now relative to a lot of other times, even especially because, you know, the internet makes it seem like everything's just horrible all the time because, you know, awesome stories are not quite as clickbaity as horrible ones. And that's but that's our human nature, you know, there's a lot of underlying reasons for that. I think that I don't see how we escape.
Well, I think some of the best science is in that, and that will trickle down. I think some of the best science is saying, hey guys, be careful, be cautious of letting children engage in in social media at an early age, and also take rest from it, be good to yourself by disengaging from it. I think our the best of our neuroscience right now is already confirming that this rage culture, or this recreational rage, I love to call it, is detrimental to our mental capabilities and our psyche.
Oh yeah, go watch Jonathan Haidt lectures about, like, you know, the weird increase in, like, if you look at the difference between millennials and Gen Z, and the very disparate numbers of teen suicide that you find in groups that are only different in age by a year or two. There's a stark divide, and he's like, it seems quite clear social media is, if not at the heart, it is deeply interwoven with that problem. There
was a study, David, that you told me about. I think it was MIT that did this, that said there is a we automatically made this assumption that children growing up right now are going to be so computer literate because they're just using computers more, and they're actually not. They're going to be, it's more of a reductive language, because not only are they more tablet literate, they're more specifically iPad literate, because that's what they're using. And it's actually, we need to go back to use a keyboard, use a mouse, understand that these things associate with each other, as opposed to this is the one way to communicate. This is the one way to control something. And I think that social media definitely is kind of part and parcel to that. And Amy, to your point as well, I think that part of the problem is that it is so reflective of a systemic issue. Again, we keep coming back to this thing. It's a systemic thing, because these two establishments, these two institutions have, by and large, they have the legacy, they have the financial support, and that is what wins elections. And people have proven that. We had the notion, what we need is some guy to come in here who's independently wealthy and just doesn't care about all the super PACs, doesn't care about getting everybody's money, and they can just run the country as they think is best. And that's, I think, what got Trump elected. Was, here's this seemingly smart businessman, and this self-touted, brilliant, and incredibly wealthy person who didn't need anybody else's money. But of course, he even admitted, he was like, you never use your own money. You get people to give you money. And so he just he did the exact same thing that everybody else did. He got other people to give him millions of dollars to be able to fund his campaign. But hopefully that, I think that we're being a bit idealistic. And Austin, this kind of goes back to what you were saying as far as the level of you always have to go down to just the nature of this office it predicates you to be somewhat of an asshole. It's either a giant douche or a turd sandwich, always. Amy, thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for being a part of this community too. It's always good to hear from as you said, the outside in. Because
did we address it all? I kind of feel like, at least I feel like I failed to address what you were.
Well, part of what I was trying to, I studied government and politics in college. I studied English politics first, and then we studied American politics. And at the time, the Tea Party was like this new upcoming thing. And we all sat there in class saying they're never going to influence the election at all. And although the Tea Party is not necessarily something that, to my knowledge, has vehemently sort of been something that came into power, there's certainly an allegiance between sort of what I would class them as a far right group, and them being more involved with the politics that Trump puts himself forward to. And that's what I sort of meant by extremism. It's not to the point where, we're looking at dictatorship, but we're looking at a type of politics that at one point was so far beyond anyone's comprehension that they were, we're voting for the status, what I would say the status quo. We're voting for sort of a left, slightly central politician versus a right, slightly central politician. We're not voting for one way or the other. Whereas now it feels like there's definitely more of a sway, not just in America, but in Britain too, where it's either you're that way or you're that way. There's no middle ground, or there's very little middle ground to vote upon when it comes to voting day.
And this is kind of what I got to just a little while ago, as far as the notion that there are more hard lines that have been drawn, and there is no, like Austin always says, there's always so much subtlety and nuance to every conversation, to where there's, you know, we have to unpack that. It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like you're either we should not be able to or just to not understand that all these things are so interconnected. And that they affect things. And I don't understand why you can't just do this. It's like, well, because there's a whole system of government that was put in place to be able to, you want to give this to this people, but you forget that you're taking away from these people, and it's not as easy as you think it is. That's why when Trump said, it was like, it's going to be so easy, it's going to be so easy, it's going to be so easy. I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because it's not so easy. It's incredibly difficult. And if it was so easy, we would have done it by now. It's not like we were waiting for this one guy to come in and fix everything for us.
Right.
It's a system that
This
you have to
brilliant
change.
businessman.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
you just wait and see. I'm gonna keep you in suspense. It's gonna be brilliant. 2016, he said he had he had a health plan, and he still hasn't done it. It's like, and not only that, but then he was like, we just did this thing. And Chris Wallace, I got to commend him for doing this. He was like, you signed this into what did he call it? A very symbolic, I think is the word he used, a symbolic healthcare plan 5 days before this. You know, that has to have been, you got a photo op off of this. And the thing that, whether you agree with, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, it got passed through Congress. It passed through the Senate. Like, that's impressive. That meant that two differing people had to come together and go, all right. And nobody seems to remember this. Obama was like, this is the starting point. It better get better from here.
Right.
Like, this is not I don't think this is the be all end all. It's like, we have to start from here. And then my hope is that somebody makes this better. So anybody coming in and going, well, we need to abolish it. It's like, well, that's just stupid. Build upon it. Make it better. It's like, well, you got to strip it down to its phrase. Like, I don't think you do, man. And there's a lot of your other colleagues that disagree with you too, because they voted this thing in. We have about 10 minutes actually, before we need to kind of move on through other people. Amy Bennett, thank you. You are always welcome here. I appreciate your contribution to this conversation. Tom, who else do we have?
Yeah, I'm going to hop off in that
You are?
same. Yeah, sorry, I got to run. I'm realizing the time, and I have some other calls I gotta make. But thanks for having me, man. And appreciate. I was able to dip into your comments on YouTube very briefly, but really appreciate it. My final thought, if I
Please.
can share, is I think a question that we don't ask ourselves very often is. For every conviction that we hold, what it would take to persuade you that you're wrong. And I think until we honestly wrap our head around that, we'll never actually listen to other people who disagree with us, because they, as far as we are concerned, they're just spouting nonsense because we know we are right. And I just don't think that's a healthy place to operate from. And so I think, and ultimately that comes down to compassion and empathy, and looking and saying, I think somebody arrived at this conclusion somehow. Maybe they have very rational, reasonable reasons, and maybe they don't. Maybe they are, someone, like in the case of what I see a lot to the point she was making just a second ago as well, that I completely agree with, is things are so divided where, if let's say I am a straight down the middle on a knife's edge centrist, and then I think, I'm sorry, but this is hypothetical. I actually feel the opposite of this, but let's say that I come to the conclusion that I think abortion, I really just can't see it as not murder. Like, I really just, to me, potential personhood may as well be personhood. I've decided that issue matters enough to me, and all the rest basically don't matter to me. I'm a very apolitical person, but that one, I feel like, this candidate says they speak to abortion right. And so okay, fair point. We can have that conversation. The problem that she was illustrating, that I think is truly a plague, and I think that if we had more compassion and we were more eager to be proven wrong, this wouldn't be as much of a problem, is that what happens to someone in that position is that they They say, okay, I'm going to vote for this person. And now suddenly they've crossed 1 millimeter into the right.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now I'm going to tell you what else you believe. You this, that, this, that, this, that. And before you know it, and then the thing is, because they are now on the defensive, they're more likely to say, well, these people are accepting of me. I'll listen to them. Hey, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe we should be lowering taxes, or maybe we should be, going after China and imposing trade tariffs and blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, they're like in this feedback loop of a thing that they didn't care about any of that before. But because they cross the line, everyone just, they become this tug of war back and forth, and they're going to go with the one that's closest proximity. And I'm like, it robs all potential for nuance out of the equation, and it makes you suddenly own beliefs you don't actually have, and then very quickly kind of get propagandized or indoctrinated into believing you actually have those beliefs. And I think that's a shame. And it's part of why I hate the idea of a two-party system, because life is not along some right or left spectrum. I mean, it's like, it should be more like a spider web that exists also in 3D, that is a spider web in all dimensions. So anyway, the reductionism to me is the great tragedy. And I just only implore that people go into a thing saying, nothing would please me more than to be proven wrong in this conversation about a belief I hold, because the best thing about being proven wrong is that's what it feels like to now discover you're right. And it should be an addicting feeling. It is for me. So anyway, I feel like I kind of stole your floor here more
Not
than
at all.
But thanks for inviting me.
Dude, it is. Thank you, man. You're a dear friend and a wicked mind. And there was never an imposition, and there's never a floor to be stolen. It is only to be shared. And that hits to the very core of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. And I
love
this notion of the relator community, and the few times I've sat in and with you, Tom and David, you guys are both freaking awesome. And I love conversation and dialogue is truly the only, even if it's passionate, even if it's contentious, all the better. And
absolutely.
Anyway, keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for having me.
Thanks Austin. It's always good to have you, man.
Talk to you guys later.
To that point, he's exactly right. It's like it should be an addictive feeling to discuss our views, even under contention, because the only thing that can happen is either this is the whole reason why I have this right here, this tattoo right here, is that this is thesis, my view, this is antithesis, your view, and together we come together and we find, this is the whole reason with this relator logo, we find a better worldview. And that could even be, hey, I believe that all people are equal and you don't, and we discuss it, and I understand what your points of your argument are, and I still go, no, I believe in this even more because I've discussed it, I have stretched it, and I have grown it, and it is now stronger. It doesn't mean that the erosion of your beliefs, it means that they become more embedded in who you are, and you don't just believe them as a cognitive thing, you believe them viscerally, you believe them passionately. So I invite you to enter discourse and not shy away from it. We have a time for just I think probably one more. Tom, is that right?
We've really got over our time, so we can do a quick lightning round of a few questions that we have from Patreon.
I would love to do that. Please, what you got?
So the first one's from Ryan. He says, parts of the debate seem to be especially used by the candidates to spread disinformation. Do you think there should be live fact-checking? If so, by whom?
I mean, look,
I love that.
Yeah, watching last night, that would have been fantastic. The problem is that I believe that a lot of the subjective, or that a lot of the facts that they're pulling are subjective. A recent poll shows this. It was like, well, who'd you poll? It's like there were 20 chipmunks outside Ryan's window, and they all nodded to that. So it's again, if you haven't seen that there are nuances to each of these arguments, getting into the facts can be a discussion within itself. And I feel like last night was this whole thing is like, that's just absolutely not true. That's just absolutely not true. I found that compelling. I was like, wait a minute, why is that not true?
Right.
I want to know why you're not saying that, and how Chris Wallace, again, I have to commend him. Look, the guy has a long legacy. His dad, Mike Wallace, pioneered this whole industry. He, along with Walter Cronkite and even after that, Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, all these people that I grew up watching. Chris Wallace comes from a long legacy of people who understood what journalism was, and that was like, I even said this, I am the moderator here, okay? I'm not here to referee between you two. I'm the moderator, which means I will ask a question. You have 2 minutes to respond to my answer, and then I'm going to turn it over to your opponent, and they have 2 minutes to reply. The notion that it is incumbent upon the moderator to fact check, I believe, to be antithetical to what a debate is. It is only incumbent upon the people, because that moderator is not voting for us. The moderator is there to provide a platform for two people to spew whatever shit they want to, but under the decorum that they have both agreed to. It is not to be there.
Unfortunately,
what's that?
And unfortunately, it's become so Twitter distilled. I don't know what a better way to say it. It's become so small of a conversation that you can't actually get into the weeds. And it couldn't be more important now to get into the weeds. So I just think we need a different structure. I think we need people that are willing to sit for 6 hours and to dig through the information. And I think they should be prepared to give those solid numbers.
That is the voter. This is the problem. Is that people are saying, well, Fox News said this, well, CNN said this, well, MSNBC said this. I listened to so-and-so, and they say, I listened to John Oliver, and John Oliver said this. It's like, it's not, don't pass the responsibility off to somebody else, because those people are not going to go vote for you. It is your ballot that you will receive, or you will go into the polls, and you will mark your, take some goddamn responsibility and learn for yourself. I'm speaking to myself too. It's like when someone says a term that I don't know, I better not just go, well, I disagree with you because of your political affiliation. I'm going to look it up and go, what does that mean? And it is incumbent upon me to inform myself. It is not incumbent upon Chris Wallace to go, I'm sorry, I'm going to fact check you there, Mr. President. I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President, I have to stop you there. That is not true. If they want to spew lies, Chris Wallace is there to go, people, are you watching this? This guy is talking about that a red dragon is going to come and he's going to eat everybody who claims to be a vegan. He's not going to go, that is not true at all. That is not the point of a moderator. The point of a moderator is to go, you have 2 minutes to spew whatever shit you want.
And I'm not saying that we should have fact checkers. What I'm saying is we need a different amount of time so that these presidential candidates can actually get into what they're wanting to say, because what happens is that they've got 2 minutes and it almost feels like they're scared to go any longer. Like they wouldn't have anything else to say. And I think we need to be the kind of people that are patient with this information. You're right. We need to fact check for ourselves. We need to look into it. We need to research. If this is something we really think is important, we should head towards those. And I do very often in my life. I spent way too long fact checking last night. But what I'm trying to say is we just need a more robust debate. That's all. I think an hour and 40 minutes is too short.
Well, this is the first of 3, right? So we're going to get into more. But again, I think that there's no more better system. Is like, if you can't, again, this is going to be the meme. I'm going to pick this one out. But Chris Wallace says, will you right now? 2 questions. 2 times he said this. Will you commit to right now to a peaceful transition? Will you commit to right now doing what is in the best interest of the American people? Will you commit right now to stopping the white supremacists and people? Will you say that right now? Do it right now. You have 2 minutes to respond. And he couldn't even do it then. That's not a, well, clearly we need to change the system, because everyone, it's not the system that needs to change. It's, they don't need 2 minutes. They should do it in 60 seconds. How will you do this?
I just love letting someone that doesn't really have a clear idea of what they're about to say go to the end of their
for sure
talking out in order to see. So it's like, okay, you've got 10 minutes. And if you don't want to use up those 10 minutes, you're a fool, because you should be using every single second. And Biden wouldn't have used up more than that. Trump could have, but he would have just said the same thing over and over again. This is my opinion. Biden couldn't come up with the thing to say. And I want to know that. I want to know what kind of guy is in the Situation Room, or is talking with a diplomat from another nation. Like, I want to know what he sounds like when he's monologuing. I want to know what the motherfucker
really
sounds like
important.
when he's talking to himself in the bathroom. And that's why I think we need 10 minutes. And your mic is fucking shut off. And
now
you're gonna let the guy, you know what I mean?
that is decorum. I think that there's going to be things
Yep.
like, I'm going to turn off your microphone until it's your turn to talk. I think that, first of all,
Yep.
I think that's something that CBS or whoever's going to do the thing next is going to do.
Seems like it.
Which we should have, is like, I'm going to shut your fucking microphone off. But I do agree with you. This is one of the reasons why it is important to watch these debates and to not watch the clips, by the way. Because if you're watching the clips, you're watching an edited version of that, and editing is a very creative thing, and you will inherently, it's like watching the first time that I went to a boxing match, and I did it, not watching it on HBO, but actually watching, from the seats. I was like, oh, clearly this person won. And they're like, nope, absolutely not. Because what you didn't see is we were counting the punches, and you missed that commentary and how much that swayed your opinion as to who was actually winning or losing that fight. So I think it's the same way. Watching the debates is important. David, you're exactly right. Because you want to see when someone's in that situation, you're like, well, they're tired, they've been traveling, they're being hit. And Chris Wallace said, none of these candidates will receive these questions ahead of time. So everyone's going to be answering this in real time. I want to see how they think on their feet. If they're tired and they have to go meet with Putin and go, okay, so he just translated. I'm waiting to see how do you handle that situation? Because that's the point of a world leader. Tom, what was the other one that we had lined up?
Sorry, I was just listening to your guys. The correct answer is they should have two big lights, a green and a red one. For is this true or is this not?
The correct answer is
we're going to lose our ability to do the relator reads today.
Yeah,
if we
so
don't
we
end
should-
soon. Just
All
Right. So
sorry.
Tom, we have one more.
It's just what do you think the next 4 years will look like? Doesn't matter what candidate, but that's from Greg.
Oh man,
I think.
I don't know what the next 4 years will look like. And I don't. Who could have guessed in 2016 that we would be having not just like any of this, like every day. It's been the most captivating TV. It's like, who would have thought that some almost forgotten celebrity and some athlete, we would be glued to our TVs from the moment that a helicopter picked up on a white Bronco going down the 405. And that changed our culture for forever. When the world that's why LA Law or Law and Order and all of those shows came into fruition, was because in 1994, all of a sudden people found out, like, people really like to watch courtroom drama. Well, fine, let's give them all the courtroom drama. It's no longer Matlock. It's no longer Perry Mason. This is about, people want to know about they want to feel like they are solving the crime. They want to feel like they are solving the murder, that it's not Angela Lansbury, that it's not Matlock, that it's not these other people. I'm listing a lot of fucking people from the 80s and 90s, by the way. But it changed because all of a sudden it became, I am now doing it. And I think it goes to the exact reason why we're having this discussion today is reclaiming your responsibility. And if you really want to feel like you have agency, you are not going to win on Twitter. You will never win an argument on Twitter, ever, ever, ever. You're punching at air. You have to vote, because that's one way that you can actually have a haptic response into the government. Whether you want to believe that or not, vote whatever way that you can. If you're going to vote by the mail-in ballots, if your state is doing mail-in ballots, or if you're doing early voting, vote now. Or wait until you see more debates. Wait until you get more information. Or suit up, go to the polls, wear a mask, whether you believe that this pandemic is real or not, which is a crazy conversation. Please just do it. It is not about you being safe. The stupid argument that I've heard people say was like, I've seen what those scientists have to wear when they're dealing with viruses. You think a cloth mask over my face is going to keep me from getting sick? No, asshole. It's going to keep other people from getting sick. That's why you wear a mask. It's the same reason why you don't sneeze in somebody's face. You cover your mouth with your crook of your arm, by the way. Wear a mask out of being polite. Your mother raised you better than that. Say please and thank you. It's the same thing. And go to the polls and vote.
Vote, 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 vote. Love it.
Go ahead. What are you going to say?
I've been spamming the link for the voting website. It's also in the description.
Perfect.
Please, like, if we've learned anything from these debates or over the past 4 years, this is how you, like, we can riot, we can protest, we can do whatever, but this is how your voice is going to be heard. There are a lot of people that I know who specifically were just like, my vote doesn't matter. It's one of a million. And it's like, yes, you are one that makes a million.
Well said,
like that.
Tom. You are one that
Like
makes a
it.
million.
Love
Hopefully, everyone who's watched this for 2 hours, my God. I don't know if we'll do this again. I hope that if you've learned nothing from us, especially from me, the point of this is to have discourse, even if we disagree. Especially if we disagree, I want to talk with you. I definitely want to thank you all and everybody, Amy B, Ashkan, Austin, obviously, for joining us. We wanted to get to more questions. We'll hopefully get to that next time. I think that this will stay up. So if you haven't, if you wanted to go back through and tell us you disagree with us, then that's the whole point. Please do. In the interim, David, you've got a wonderful little thing that you need to go set up, right?
Yes, sir.
So
Yeah, sure.
Dune is up. Thank you guys for having this conversation with you. Be kind to each other. That's all I can say. There we go.